Rocket League has to be one of the biggest competitive games in the world. But what if I told you one region has a competitive disadvantage compared to everyone else? So which region is it? Well, today we're going to be talking about why OCE is at a complete disadvantage in Rocket League. To understand why this is the case, we first need to get to know the region. So what does OCE look like? Well, it's predominantly made up of countries including Australia, New Zealand, and many small islands around them. As you've probably already noticed, they're largely isolated from the rest of the world, and because of that, have a much smaller population compared to countries in Europe and the Americas. People commonly associate this region with summery beaches, fuzzy koalas, a kangaroo or two, and lots of animals that will try and kill you. But one thing that isn't commonly associated with this region is esports. In Australia specifically, esports isn't even recognised as a proper sport, unlike other countries such as France and the Americas, which house some of the biggest esports scenes in the world. As a result, the esports scene in OCE is a lot smaller than the rest of the world, much like the Rocket League scene in general. So in summary, OCE is isolated from the rest of the world, has less people, and has a smaller esports scene. So why is this a problem? Well, let's begin with the fact that there's less people. The most obvious thing is that there will be longer queue times, especially as you go up the ranks. And while this is annoying, it's not necessarily unique to the region. However, what is actually unique to the region is that because there are so little players in the higher ranks, someone like me who is ranked around GC2 is going to literally come up against a pro player every single game. And this is because there are simply not enough players for pros to play against, so the game match makes them against players who are significantly lower, which is me. As Thanovic, a fellow OCE content creator, has also pointed out, this gate keeps people from actually getting up the ranks, but it also is bad for the pros, which I'll get into a bit later. And since the hard MMR reset in Season 11, this problem has literally only gotten worse, whereas in NA and EU, this has largely sorted itself out. And it's not like you can queue into another region to try get quicker queue time, because OCE is that isolated. OCE can literally only connect to APAC and US West servers, and on these servers they have over 150 ping, and as you can imagine, this is not ideal. Now, not only do these issues affect average players, but most importantly are esports players, and they play an important role in whether the region thrives or not. Let me explain. For smaller regions like OCE, international practice is absolutely vital for them to get better, because at home, they don't necessarily have as much competition as those other regions. So big events like international LANs in the rlcs are absolutely vital for these players. This only occurs 4 times in a year at the 3 international LANs and at Worlds. The ability to be able to practice against international pros will make their players better, and when they come back to their region, they will come up against their own bubble players as well as their ranked players, who in turn will also get better. However, when it comes to OCE, there's one slight problem. As we touched on earlier, esports in OCE is less prioritized than in other countries, and so because of that, the esports scene is a lot smaller. This means there are significantly less bubble events and community run events for pro players to play in. Ranked isn't even an option either, because they end up coming against players my skill, which isn't great practice for them. And it's not like they can queue other regions and try play against international pros, purely because of the ping disadvantage. This means when they actually go to international LANs, they only have a very small period to actually get meaningful practice. And when they come back, they're not necessarily going to play ranked because of the queue times or participate in a huge amount of community events, which deprives bubble players and ranked players like me any possible way to get better. And in turn, this makes the region worse. As well as this, due to the lack of funding and the smaller scale, the rlcs events in OCE don't necessarily get promoted as much as NA and EU. This can be largely attributed to the fact that OCE events are not prioritized on the rlcs socials. This means that less people will watch these events, and in turn they'll receive less funding. As well as this, having less content creators in OCE means that there will be less promotion for these rlcs events, which in turn makes being a pro in OCE much less viable, especially coupled with the fact that orgs will pay you less because the competition is making less money. But most importantly, this lack of funding is going to result in no future LANs being hosted in OCE, which would provide a massive boost for the region. Plus, no international players have any incentive to actually come to the region and possibly make it better, which is a major factor why regions like APAC are actually doing quite well now. And there are lots of other reasons why OCE is at a disadvantage, but for the sake of time, I'm going to simply sum this up by saying that all these factors results in less practice and quality players in OCE, and as a result, it trickles down to the rest of the region. And while some of these factors aren't necessarily unique to the region, no other region has every one of the factors I've listed so far. So is there any way we can actually fix this? Well, yes and no. There are some things we simply can't change, like the fact that OCE is isolated from the rest of the world. However, there are things that the developers of the game game, as well as the governments in the region, and even the community can do. Let's start with the developers. The first thing would be to revise the MMR changes that they did in Season 11, because these have had negative impacts on smaller regions in particular. But probably one of the most important things would be to schedule a LAN here, because that would probably be the biggest thing for the region. Next, for the governments, simply recognizing esports as a proper sport would go a long way to helping these issues, because more funding would allow the region to expand in this space. But finally, what can the community do? Well, it's pretty simple. Simply just watch and promote these events. Whether you're a content creator like me, or just an average player, taking interest in these events will prompt meaningful change. And even though there are a lot of issues to do with Rocket League in Oceania, it actually is one of the best regions for Rocket League. So next time there's an Oceania event on, feel free to take a look, because I think you might be surprised. If you want to see more content like this, feel free to like and subscribe. And I also have a very big announcement, which is that I've officially partnered with BRAINSTORM Esports as a content creator. I'm extremely excited to work with these guys, so feel free to check them out down below. This is mouldyshoe. Thanks for watching.